radio on. In the backseat, girl with the radio on.
Why do fools fall in love? Why do birds fall in love? And lovers who wait to break the day. Why do they fall in love? Oh, why does the rain fall from above? Why do fools fall in love? Why do they fall in love? Love is a losing game. Love can be the shame. I know a fool you see. For that fool is me, tell me why.
That was the Teenagers in their television debut national debut in 1956. My gosh, 1956, the Teenagers. Original members were Frankie Lyman, Herman Santiago, Joe Negroni, Sherman Garnes, and Mr. Jimmy Merchant, who we have the pleasure in our studio today. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Jimmy Merchant.
Mr. Dave Rebels.
Jimmy, how you doing, Jimmy?
Oh, hey, listen. Thank the Lord. Thank the Lord. At 82, still here.
Man, you're ticking, man. Let me tell you about this thing. Just a little bit more for folks who don't know. The Teenagers with Frankie Lyman, they're actually the very first teen idols. They set the template for all the teen groups that came after because they were the very first superstars. It was the Teenagers. They were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993, Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 2000, Grammy Hall of Fame in 2001, enshrined into the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I walked across that right there in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, East Coast Music Hall of Fame just this past year. So what a history. You've seen some of the posters there from their days when they were famous. I mean, they were like Haley's Comet. They came and they went within 2 years, but they lingered in the hearts and souls of people to this day with that song. Why do fools fall in love? People are asking that question right now. Why do fools fall in love? Because it feels good, don't it, Jimmy?
Well, you know, the idea of it came from a girl, a woman, and these short notes about a girl that was in love with someone that she wasn't getting the feedback that she thought she should get. She was overly both in love and hurt, that she started calling herself a fool, you know. So it is basically a standard with regard to love itself and the humane feeling, the human feeling of wanting to be loved back, and that not getting that love back makes a person feel foolish. And so she said, how is it that a fool can fall in love? And so when those little notes that she wrote to a guy, and the guy somehow passed these little notes on to these four boys that sing in a hallway, and the four boys was myself, Herman Santiago, Joe Negroni, Sherman Garnes. We four ninth graders had no idea whatsoever where we were headed, but we were just hooked up to the so-called harmony thing, you know, Dave, that had broken out, you know, on the radio, and kids was chasing it, and people were singing it on the corners, and we was just copying stuff on the radio, and this guy in the hallway handed us these notes, you know, that this girl had written, and we learned later that she actually lived in the building. So, but nevertheless, these notes came to the group, and you know, another interesting side of this little story here is I had just moved into the neighborhood, into this area where this was my first, um, basically, uh, intermission with the school system, because my mother left the Bronx and she went to Washington Heights. And then when I got into the ninth grade, the first day of the ninth grade, I met first guy of the four other people that are going to be Frankie Lyman and a teenager. So I was sort of a missing guy in the neighborhood, because my mother got into that neighborhood when I was 14 in the ninth grade. So these four guys get together, me and Sherman and Herman and Joe Negroni, and we're singing stuff in the hallway, and we moved into the ninth grade. We're moving into 1955, and everybody's singing on the corners. The stuff is on the radio. Dr. Jive, Alan Freed. There were shows at the Paramount Theater, at the Apollo Theater, and we was copying all these people. And this dude walked up to us when we were singing in the hallway to get an echo. He said, "You guys need to sing something original. I got these letters. A friend of mine got these little notes. He handed us about 8 or 9 notes. And one of them was called 'Why the Birds Sing So Gay, Why the Fools Fall in Love.'" I took that. I took that. Well, you see how things go.
Yeah.
You see how things go. So I was, I'll add this before your next question. The ironic part is I had no idea, Dave, that when my mom relocated, I was mad because I was going to start a group in the ninth grade in the Bronx. And my mother said, "No, we're getting out of here. We're relocated. I'm leaving Dad." I said, "Well, wait a minute. I know you and Dad ain't too cool." But, I love my father, of course. But it was another relationship falling apart. So she had to relocate. She had to leave. She had to relocate, leaving my dad. And I was upset. I was about to start a group in the Bronx, but then I moved to this area where I moved into a school where 4 guys are going to be Frankie Lyman and a teenager. I was the missing link. So back to the letters. This guy in the hallway was just the 4 of us now, ninth graders. Frankie was nowhere around. Frankie lived in the neighborhood. We knew him. He lived in the same block as the school. Wow, you see how things work. The kid lived in the same block in the school, lived in the same block as the school. He went to the school. But this is the important part of this story, that these letters that we got, out of them came the song called "Why the Fools Fall in Love." And I was the one in the group that had the musical inspiration. We all had musical inspiration. We all had dreams to sing. But I had the ability to take these letters and start to copy what I was hearing on the radio and make up a song out of that 1625 or 1625 chord combination that we heard in so-called doo-wop and rock and roll and rhythm and blues music, like "Is It a Dream?" Do, 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 do. 1625, So I said, "Sherman, do this." Do, 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 do. And I had Herman. Herman was the lead singer. I said, "Why do birds," with a Puerto Rican accent. No, he didn't have a Puerto Rican accent. He could really sing. So there came the song, "Why the Fools Fall in Love." And when we graduated out of the ninth grade, we had a group called the Ermins. And Frankie lived in the neighborhood, and we started doing talent shows. Frankie was on the same talent show. He had been following us around. He'd been trailing us around. He wanted to sort of hang out with us, and he threw his first tenor. And Sherman would say, "Man, you can't hang out here." He said, "I'm going to be a star, man. What about you?" Sherman said, "Yeah, okay, we'll see. We'll see about that. But you can't hang out here." He was a 7th grader, and it was in after June, we had graduated from the ninth grade. That's the same school that we were going to, junior high. We were headed toward high school, George Washington. But in the summer, we lived in that neighborhood, and we were going to attend these so-called amateur night shows or amateur shows at the school. And so Frankie was on them. Long story made short, Richard Barrett of the Valentine comes into the neighborhood. He sees us. He sees Frankie trying to hang out with us. Um, we was glad to be talking to Richard Barrett of the Valentines, and me and Sherman went down to the Apollo and see the Valentines sing that month. And Richard Barrett said, I'll take you guys down to the same recording company that we're at, G Records, Rama Records, and talk to George Goldner and try to get you guys a record deal, even though George basically was into also Tico Records. He had Spanish. He said maybe the fact that we got two Spanish guys in the group, George will buy it. George, when we auditioned, the four of us, Frankie is now in the group because Frankie, Richard Barrett, Dave insisted of the Valentines. He insisted that we bring this little kid in for the audition. So we're auditioning in front of George. Frankie was not the lead singer. People think that he was, but he was not the lead singer. Herman was. He was in the group singing first tenor, but we gave him one song. And the one song that we gave him to sing was I Want You to Be My Girl, which is another song that I personally wrote. So George Goldner says, okay, I see Herman Santiago as your lead singer. He's not bad. But what about you, little kid? You're singing tenor in the background next to this tall boy. What can you do? He said, Mr. Goldner, I could do anything. What do you want me to do? He said, well, let's hear you sing a song. And Frankie took the song, I Want You to Be My Girl, the only song that he sang in the group, and he blew George Goldner away with that, with us singing background, of course. He says, okay, Richard Barrett, bring these boys back in a couple of weeks. I'm going to record them. I'm going to try to get them done before Christmas. And then
history. And then history happened. But this is, you see, like I said, you want to go one way, but life takes you another course. And to me, what that proves is that, you know, you should never look at a closed door as the end of it. It just means you need to walk to another door or through another entrance. But, you know, here you guys are teenagers, and the song takes off. And let me tell you how I know the song so well. Okay. You know, it's like a nursery rhyme to everybody. Yeah. Interesting enough, Jimmy, now, I was born in 1955. And this was the beginning of your life and was beginning of my life. Yes, and right. How life is, I don't know how many years later, here you and I are meeting and we're friends.
Then let's be, before you say it, don't hold your point. we in 1955, December 3rd, that's when we recorded Why the Fools Fall in Love. Okay, go ahead. You were born that same year.
Born. That's what I'm saying. So here you are, you know, you went from just being schoolboys, hanging out, maybe flirting with the girls and getting, you know, excitement from the attention that brings. And, you know, a lot of times people start groups because they want the attention of the opposite sex. But now this takes off. And here's a bunch of teenagers. Now, all of a sudden, you find yourself in a world of adults. Because let's face it, that's what that industry is. People say, when they hear the word music business, it's actually business of music. And you're surrounded by adults. And they all have the ideas of what they're going to do with your lives and where they're going to take you and how they're going to make more money off of you and all those things that take place. But now you're traveling all over the country. You're getting on planes and flying overseas and doing all this. I mean, how did you handle that personally? I mean, you know, here you are a bunch of schoolboys. If 1 week you're schoolboys, they record a record, it's released. Within 1 month, you just don't walk down the street anymore as Jimmy Merchant. You're a teenager. And all of you from that point on is known as the teenagers. And you're rubbing shoulders at all these fabulous stars. They know your name. You know, there's, of course, this is much later when you met Mary Wilson, many years later. But we go about the 50s now. You guys, even Marilyn Monroe knew who you guys were.
Yeah.
She was wearing your T-shirt.
That's right.
I mean, what in the world did that do to a teenager like you guys to see Marilyn Monroe wearing your T-shirt and smiling like that? I mean, that's amazing. How did you handle it? I mean, how did the rest of the guys handle this mushroom, this volcano of attention? How did you handle it?
Well, it was like when we did their first show in Hartford, Connecticut, after Why the Fools Fall in Love was released. at the end of December of your year, just before New Year's. Then by the time we go to school, back to school. After New Year's, I think it's the second day of the month when the kids go back to school, the second day of the month of January. Goldner told us he wanted for the song to be a hit. He released it a day or two before January 1956. So now I'm changing classes on the 2nd of January, George Washington High School. Sherman is in that school, Sherman and Herman and Joe. Frankie's still in Stick because he's now going into the 8th grade. But we're changing classes. I'm going to my accounting class, and I see this girl in my class singing, "Tell me why." And I said, "Oh shoot!" The second of the month, I walked up to her. I said, "Hello." "Don't stop me. I'm singing. Tell me why." I said, "Just 1 second." She said, "I'm changing classes. I got to go to my accounting." I said, "Yeah, well, we're going to the same class. I just want to ask you, keep walking toward the accounting. Tell me, where did you hear that song?" "What do you mean, where did you hear that song?" "It's everywhere. It's on every radio station. Tell me why." I said, okay. What's the name of the group?" "They're called the Teenagers, 5 girls."
So you were still a little anonymous at that point. They didn't quite know who you were at that point, huh?
It was the first time that I heard the song being sung by anybody after we recorded it.
But
So
when did it click? When did it click with everybody in the school that you were the part of Teenagers? I mean, what was the moment that you realized?
The next day, as soon as when I stopped her, we went into accounting. I didn't say nothing yet. I couldn't wait to get home. I called up Sherman, and Sherman said, "Yeah, man, I heard it, man. I'm a little disappointed." I said, "What you disappointed about?" "I think, man, the harmony could have been a little louder." I said, "Yeah, but man, everybody's singing it everywhere." And that I spoke to Joe and Herman. The 4 of us was excited, and that was the beginning. And they started putting us on weekend dance hops. And then I think it was in February, we did our first show in Hartford, Connecticut, where we actually got paid. Richard Barrett was on that show. The Cadillacs was on that show. Bo Diddley and what's his name in the Cadillacs was trying to show us we needed some steps.
Speedo.
Speedo was in the group, but it was one of the other Cadillacs that was showing us steps because they was doing Charlie Atkins. See, Charlie Atkins.
Yeah, the choreographer. Great choreographer.
We're doing the choreography. Yeah. But to answer your question, that first year we did 350 to 60 to 70 one-nighter tours. Every night we're in a different state, different city. We did 3 tours. At the end of the year, we did a movie. We started working on an album. We did a lot of TV shows. We was on the road meeting other singers. You name it. We worked with all Chuck Berry, all these people. And we were chased by a lot of girls backstage, people wanting autographs, and we were learning how to pull girls to us and try to form relationships with girls, even if we were in town only that one day, because we every day we were in a different city, so it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll entering our lives. So Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers unfortunately came to an end a year and a half later after we did those 3 tours. We had went to England. We had did 2 movies. And while we were in England, they told us they wanted to take Frankie out of the group and make him a lead singer. ironic part about it all, it took me a while to come to grips with something falling apart because it was a dream that started for me, Dave, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, 4 or 5 years old, listening to my father play jazz and watching him dance with my mother, watching my father imitate jazz instruments, shoo-wop, shoo-wop, shoo-doo-be-doo-be-doo-wop. And, I guess that's where the terminology doo-wop came from, and watching him doing the sand on the floor while he's smoking a Camel cigarette out his mouth. I had been born already with the gift of an ear to hear music that developed into a dream. So the dream started basically after I started listening more to this music and picking up on vocal groups coming out on the radio and then singing on the corners. By the time I'm 12 years old, the vocalist, do, 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 do. Is it a dream? The harp tones, I think they hit somewhere around 54. Then the dream came to an existence when my mother relocated and I hooked up with Sherman and Joe and Herman and Frankie. And it all fell apart after Frankie was taken out the group. And somewhere around 1985, I felt like I was at the end of myself. And I said, what happened to my dream? What happened to my dream? And all of a sudden, I started going to church. And even well after I started going to church in 85, I didn't understand what this dream thing was. It took me years to come to grips. Even after I started going to church and became a Christian, it took me years to come to grips with what had happened in my life with regard to my singing history and what happened with that so-called dream that I had. It turned out that God is the one that gave me the gift to sing, that became a dream that fell apart, that now I'm in church. I'm supposed to tell and show the world that when something falls apart, it's because God is wanting to basically use what he gave you that started with a gift that became a dream to you. God wanted to use that dream for himself.
That's so well said for me, man.
Yeah.
What I learned about you, Jimmy, and I think the example that you work for so many people is that when one door closes, how loud that door closes can be very shocking to your system, because you still want to be on the other side of the door where all that excitement that you think you wanted. But what you have shown me is that, you found renewed strength, and you're, to me, an example that's needed for people whose dreams have gone astray, or it's been cut short for some reason without their doing it. You kept wanting to do what you wanted to do, but other people who got in the middle of things ended that dream for you in that manner. But the excitement thing that I find with you is that you have like a caterpillar, you become that butterfly in your time, in your age, and you're still active, you're still doing things. And, I know that you're working on a book.
Yes.
And I think that's something that is your life at this time. And I think that, I will just have to say to you, don't give that dream up, because that is your life. And I know you won't anyway, but it's nice to hear somebody that's tell you not to give up on that, because you have a story, and I think it would benefit a lot of people to hear that story, so I just want to say, don't lose stride. There's so many, your life, I mean, that's a broad scope of time. And in between the time of that, you kept singing. You didn't just stop singing.
Yes.
The lights may have been turned off in some degree, and the roaring crowd has subsided, but the spark that you were given, the spiritual spark you were given, I don't think you ever lost that, and you managed to find your way through clarity through your gospel, which is been a rebirth for you. And so, even though you think that dream ended. What you did inspired, you and the group inspired so many subsequent groups after that. And I just want to say, we need to do 2 or 3 parts of this, because one question I want to end this with you is, what advice would you get? Because there have been a slew of teenage groups now, and it's going to keep going because we're in a youthful time where teenage groups are being signed. What one advice would you give a new teenage act that's coming out now, or being looked at by the world, or being thought of being signed? What advice would you give them?
Well, it is hard to you all with a listening ear to have you to come to grips with the spiritual point of view about your dream. The thing that I just said was that for me, it was a gift. It began as a gift. I was happy to be able to do these things, but it didn't become clear to me until I became associated to the creator of all things. His name is God. And I think that if we keep coming to grips with all things, creator, God, then we got to keep looking toward him to where your dream came from, whatever it is.
So
a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is.
Keep your spirit. Keep close to your spirit.
Keep
Jenny,
close to your spirit.
We got to talk about this again. We got to
Yes,
have more
good.
conversation, because amazing. Jimmy,
Praise
thank you
the
so
Lord.
much. Now, this is where we
you're
can
welcome.
contact you, right?
Yeah,
Donald A. DaCosta, 702-708-8656. If people want to get in touch with you and book you because you're still singing great, you got that. You got the bass, you got the baritone, you got some tenor left in you. You got a whole bunch of spirit, and I think people ought to see you
Yes.
perform. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, if Jimmy Merchant comes to your neighborhood, you got to go
Praise
check
the
him
Lord.
out. Jimmy and I still got open book because we got more music to do together, right, Jimmy?
Amen. And ladies and gentlemen, stay in touch with Dave. This cat he is the super performer and the super thinker behind performing.
We gotta go, man. I'll talk to you some more, all right?
God bless you, my brother.
All right.
Bye-bye.
The way we move to our favorite song in the backseat, girl with the radio on. I am in the fire. I want to feel it. We're rolling off our bodies in the midst of the heat. The way we move to our favorite song in the backseat, girl with the radio on. In the backseat, girl.